Well, and once again, Asia, Latin America, or Africa.
In Africa.
Whitey is not dominant there either.
Well, right. In all cases, it doesn't matter, what their background is. Anytime an outsider shows up, there's always suspicion. And in our own country, just for perspective, while there's a higher percentage of blacks living in generational poverty, there's a far higher number of whites living in generational poverty.
Absolutely.
I have a farm out in rural Missouri, and there's a substantial number of poor whites that live out here. The issues are identical. It's an issue of generational poverty, not an issue of race that keeps these folks in poverty. They have to see they have to see what success looks like, and like it or not, success in both work and school is based on successfully navigating middle class unwritten rules.
How so? Yeah, give an example,
for instance,
please.
All right, in generational poverty, and these are generalizations, and there's always exceptions, but generally, folks coming up in generational poverty, black or white, their first response to stress is fight or flee. And what happens to someone who does that in school?
They're kicked out.
They get kicked out. What happens to someone who does that in the workplace?
They're fired.
They're fired, and they go away not understanding the differences between those economic classes and thinking that, well, they don't like me because I live on this side of town or because I'm this color, whatever. No, they're missing the point that it's the expectations of that middle class culture. And the middle class consists of blacks, whites, Asians, everyone else. So it's not a color issue. It's a economic class issue. And those rules and expectations are based on what successes look like, which has led to these are the expectations if you want to play in this realm, in the workplace and school and so forth.
So go ahead.
To get back to your question, what happens when the white guy shows up? Well, I've long since learned, and so many people who want to help, unfortunately, can do more harm than good. And it usually starts with someone coming in trying to impose a solution. And quite frankly, trying to impose a minimum wage is another case of outsiders, in this case the government, coming in thinking they have a solution and mandating, here's the solution, as opposed to understanding the culture and the real issues. What's keeping these people from successful employment? It's not the wage that the employer pays. It's the ability for that person to perform successfully in that. Another aspect of people living in generational poverty, black or white, is that even if you succeed in getting them in a minimum wage job, I'm going to say entry-level job,
mm-hmm.
You go back a year later, 2 years later, they're still doing that same job. They don't have a personal vision that says, I want to grow and prosper and move forward. And I'm sure, like me, you and people listening who, as a teenager, got their first entry-level job, they're thinking, I don't want to be flipping burgers forever. I want to figure out how do I move forward. And even if they stay at McDonald's, they're going to end up as an assistant manager or whatever. They're then probably going to go on and get more education. And, they're going to apply for maybe a summer job, and they're going to see a resume that says assistant manager at McDonald's. And that employer's going to say, oh, okay, well, we won't start your entry level. You've got some skills here. We'll put you at whatever level. That kind of thinking process, that sort of thing just doesn't exist in generational poverty, black or white, in this country and in every other country around the world.
Well, and I'm glad you said that from a personal standpoint, because I have always been of the opinion that, and people are people. Human nature is just that we are comfortable around those who are most like us.
Oh, absolutely.
And in America, I mean, in this country, we are, I'll use the old adage, we're the ultimate melting pot, and we absolutely are. And while we have problems, race problems, diversity problems, etc., if you look at what we have to overcome with our differences and diversity. It's unbelievable what we've actually accomplished. Okay. Don't concentrate on what we haven't, but if you concentrate on what we have. And I've always been of the opinion that people are most comfortable around those most like them. The difference between me and many others is skin color. To me is not, that's not the number one determining factor. In my neighborhood, I live out here in the suburbs in western St. Charles County, and we have white people, we have black people, we have Hispanic people, we have Asian people, and for the most part, people around here don't see race, but everybody gets along because everybody likes to cut. They keep a nice lawn. They have a boat for the lake. They like to hunt or fish or whatever.
What you're describing is they embrace middle class values.
That's exactly right. And
that's not a color issue. But
it's not a color issue.
I'm also sensitive to the fact, and us white folks have to be sensitive to the fact that blacks have a long history of real struggle to find acceptance in a white world.
That's absolutely true. Absolutely true.
And I would agree with you that things generally are getting better, but you have to realize that these folks are coming from a long history. Now you add to that the oppression they suffer living in a generational poverty culture that keeps them down. And when they don't possess the understanding of how to succeed in a middle class culture, it's just added to the long list of things that oppress them. And to get back to your original question, I didn't totally answer it. So what does the white middle class guy do coming into black generational poverty? How can I be accepted or heard? Well, the thing I learned in the developing country is the last thing you want to do is walk in and say, here's how you solve your problem. What you really have to do is build from within the culture leaders who can lead others to success. So you start with a few folks, you gain their trust, you work with them, you help them succeed. They then turn to the people they know and say, hey, look, there's a new way of living here. And look what I'm able to do now. The Antoine Whitney, the guy who I really admire, who really embraced everything that we brought to him, came out of 6 years of prison, hadn't, the only work he'd done is in the drug culture. He didn't want that life anymore. And that was a key factor in his change, is making that personal decision. I don't want this life anymore. I don't want the drug life. I don't want generational poverty. He married his girlfriend. He adopted her children that were not by him. They've since had 3 of their own. They just bought a house, their first house, and are very excited about it. He'll be he'll be a journeyman electrician in just a few months. And he's an example in the workplace. The union has come to us and says, I want 50 more of these guys. He's been a positive influence with his employers. They use him as a trainer and role model for others. And so what I'm trying to say is, if you can build folks like that, they become the agents of change in their community. And that's why we say we have 4 characteristics of success: doing the right thing for yourself, doing the right thing for your family, doing the right thing for your church, and becoming an agent of change in your own community. That's how we impact those communities, is by building those from within the community who can become the agents of change.
So if you were trying to convince a young man in North St. Louis how to go the right way, you would, instead of saying, look, let me tell you what to do, you might say, let me introduce you to Antoine.
Well, yeah, in fact, they probably wouldn't even talk to me. They'd be talking to our leaders who we've developed from that community. Mm-hmm. So the quicker I can remove myself from being the face of the organization, the more effective it's going to be, because you want folks from that community relating to people in that community and leading them. So we have a guy now who leads our work, and we're now attached to an organization called Refuge and Restoration. It's founded in a church in North County, and Dr. Servine, who leads our work, comes eminently qualified. He spent 24 years in prison. He earned 2 master's degrees there. He relates well to men, and he really brings it to them. He knows how to read a man's heart. And the first thing he does is, you interested in our program? Well, come back with your pastor, because we want to know the guy is serious about growing a relationship with God, because it just removes so much of the artificial barriers to success. And so he's the face of the organization. And then mentors like Antoine are the guys who work alongside him and tying in, whoever their key influencer in life is, whoever it might be, family member or whatever, and having them bought into it, having their church bought into it, are all a part of bringing success for that person.
How do you convince a person who does not embrace Christianity? I'm an agnostic, I'm an atheist, I'm a Muslim, whatever. How do you convince that person that, look, this guy really does want to help, he just doesn't want me to come to his dopey church?
Well, and so what I've learned is we don't try to be an evangelistic organization. We're not out to convert people to Christianity. We've just had so high a success rate with folks who already have an initial faith, mm-hmm. that we start with folks who are already there faith-wise. They aren't there yet skill set-wise. They aren't there yet with a personal vision. They aren't necessarily understanding how to apply what they know about God and how that might benefit them. But we work through their local church, and we don't care which church they come from. We just want a spiritual mentor in their life, mm-hmm. because it's those issues of character that are the things that are the most important to impact. And we've just found statistically, we just find a higher success rate with those who are ready to listen to what solid character based on Christian principle looks like.
Well, and what you're saying is what I've said all along. I mean, first of all, we live in the greatest country in the world. Sure, we have problems, but there is so much opportunity here in this country with the freedom that we have, the opportunities that we have, the economy that we have. Basically, I've made this statement more than once because I scratch my head and I truly don't understand why everybody in this country doesn't succeed. Because all you have to do is decide to do it. Look, I'm going to get up every morning and I'm going to go to work. If you do that and try halfway hard at your job and you're a halfway intelligent individual, you're just going to succeed. But it's like anything else. That formula is very simple. But the physical implementation is not easy. You still have to get up every morning. You still have to get there. Yeah, you still have to do the job that may be boring or may be hard or may be dirty.
So it takes that internal drive to succeed. And just in kind of defense of folks who have just not ever succeeded in life in the context that we're talking about, you have to realize the great oppressive burden that generational poverty places on people. You and I grew up in a middle-class environment. Mm-hmm. So we grew up understanding those unwritten rules, and we had role models that taught us what success looks like. And then it was up to us to choose whether or not we were going to embrace that or not. But if you think about what your life would be like if you subtracted all of that, if you didn't have a dad in the house who went to work every day? What if your mom wasn't equipped with the skills to raise you in a healthy way, to do the things that are important to help you succeed? You add all of that burden on top of the fact that they then need to develop the internal desire to succeed. If they don't have any of those tools that we were given coming up in middle class, think how significant a hurdle that is to get there.
Well, and that's very true. Every single skill that we have is a learned skill. An example I like to use is, why do you eat with a knife and a fork? Well, everybody eats with a knife and a fork. I said, no, you eat with a knife and a fork because that's the way you were taught. They said, well, everybody eats that way. I said, not people in Asia. They eat with chopsticks because that's what they were taught.
Yeah. So that, I think that's the healthiest way to think about the perspective of where these folks are coming from, is they didn't have any of that. And so you have to, they have to be convinced that